Hello everyone, today we have Ketchem from 𝘞𝗏𝘳𝘐𝗵𝗵𝗺, and he's going to dive us on the south side of the benchmarking analysis that has been done along with the National Pork Board. And Ron, welcome to the show.
Welcome, thank you.
Appreciate you being here today. And for those that never met you or don't know you, if you can share a little bit about your background and experience.
Background, University of Missouri graduate, spent 12 years with a genetic company out of college, then 15 years working for a feed company. And then the last 18 years, was one of the owners of Swine Management Services. And then a year ago in September, we sold Swine Management Services to 𝘞𝗏𝘳𝘞. So that's what I'm doing. So I'm 47 years in the industry as far as involved with pigs.
I love it. And if you can share us, how this report came about, is that a yearly report or not? And just give that background to folks, and then we can dive into the south side of the report.
The report we did for the National Pork Board is an annual report. Now, this is the first year that 𝘞𝗏𝘳𝘞 and SMS have been asked to review the data and be part of that information. Now, Swine Management Services has got a benchmarking database that goes back 16 years. So we've been doing this for 16 years as far as benchmarking farms, US, Canada, and there's a small number of farms from Australia in our current data set.
Super cool. And all right, as we focus a little bit on sows, what are the biggest takeaways on your view?
Well, I think so. Now, the database we put together for National Pork Board is only U.S. farms. We combine data from SMS and from 𝘞𝗏𝘳𝘞 because we don't have all the same customer base. So we ended up with 600 farms that we looked at for the last 3 years. I think one of the points is there's a huge variation between productivity of lots of areas between farms. And I don't think until you get large data sets together, you don't understand how much variation there is when you're looking at basically a model of pigs and productivity. So it's a huge variation that we see in the data set.
And when you look at specific production parameters, I guess which one of those you like to look at the most, and if you can walk us through some of those numbers as well?
Well, the one that the industry uses the most is pigs weaned per mated female per year, and that's been a standard for years.
Yep.
We have a standard equation that was developed by the National Pork Board several years ago that we do, because when you start comparing data, all the different record programs have different ways of expressing the same information. So we pull in the raw data, use the same set of equations, and we come up with some numbers. So just an example, last year in 2019, the average of the database on the 600 sow farms was 26.61 pigs being mated female per year. But the top 10% or the top 60 farms were at 32.11 pigs per sow per year. And the bottom 30 farms were at 17.77 pigs. So that alone, you've got 9 pigs different per sow per year between these farms.
Wow.
Just amazing.
Yes. And I mean, health is going to have a big role in that, right? What else has been the key factors and drive that difference?
When we look at it, there's lots of things. Probably the biggest thing is people, the variation in the people at the farms. Again, that's an area we walk on a farm today, and that's the biggest thing you're saying is how do I stop the turnover of people, or how do I find the right people to bring to me to work in my industry? The other thing happens to be there's genetics, but we do some subsetting of genetic companies, and there's not a lot of difference between the genetic companies. There's more variation within. So that can be a factor. The facilities, the age. We've got farms today that are 30 years old in our database and farms that were built a year ago. And we know we built them differently now than we did 30 years ago, allowing more space and things like that. So that makes a lot of difference. And the health, you mentioned that already. Health is a huge driver. If the farm isn't healthy, things do not perform well, so that you take away that. So you got facilities, labor, and health. All those go together to come up with what productivity is going to be.
Very good. On the people side of things, I always like to dive a little on, on patterns. So any patterns that you have observed, the key things that do help have either good people or consistent and low turnover?
A lot of it today is where a lot of these farms are located. We've tried to locate them in an isolated area for the health issue, and there's a lot of times not a lot of people around that area that have been in hog production, or a lot of people that are for the labor force. So a lot of times we're having to reach out a little bit further to try to find the right people. And again, a lot of them had no experience with animals. 20, 30 years ago, most of us were growing up on a farm. We at least knew what an animal was and how to handle them. Today, they know how to do a cat or a dog, but when they go on a sow farm and they're trying to move a 500-pound sow from point A to point B, they don't understand how to do it. So I think a lot of people we've attracted, they found out it was actually a lot of physical work in there, and some people aren't really into that. So a lot of farms, we screen through a lot of people to come up with the ones that are going to stay, be part of that family at that farm, and continue to be trained and understand what needs to be done.
Very good. And how about the next parameter? Are we talking farrowing rate, or what do you like to talk next?
Well, I guess there's a couple other things we can chat about. Death loss is probably a hot topic. It's been the one the last few years that a lot of us have wrote about, and we've actually seen go up 1 to 1.5% a year. And a lot of people have done some studies. Iowa State did one a year ago looking at prolapses, and people like us, we dig deep into a lot of the data and start to look at some things. And that's an area that nobody's really got a big answer for, why it continues to go up. We've seen some things happen. We've seen that there's a lot of shift now to the younger parodied animals that are dying and being culled. And the P0s, 1s, 2s, and 3s, 1s and 2s in a lot of farms, 40 to 50% of the death loss in culls are those younger parodies. So what are we doing wrong? Are we trying to get too much productivity out of them early? Are we not developing them right? Is health a part of it? There's a lot of things we don't know there. Nutrition, all those things play a part in it. So it's an area that needs a lot more research and information. And I'm one of the ones who promoted that we need more of a standardization of death loss reasons. I looked at some data a while back and had 67 reasons for culls and deaths, and 30% of them were other or unknown. So really didn't tell us anything of why those animals were dying. So I think as an industry, we've got to look at some standardization of coming up with what we want to see and get it somewhat standardized so we can dig into what's going on and causing the problem. And in our database alone, I think our database is around about 10%, but there's variance from 4% to 24% in a year. So it's a huge variation across the industry. And it's how do we go about trying to solve that? Is it lack of good people in the units can see an animal as unhealthy and treat them, or what are we doing wrong as far as developing of that animal?
I love the what you mentioned on having that standard format. Is there a place today folks can go to kind of download the suggested standard format?
Probably not. We wrote an article. I wrote articles for National Hog Farmer. We wrote an article 2 years ago, and we actually developed a list working with actually Chris Hostetler and Ken Stoller from Iowa State. And we published it out there, but we didn't get much take on it. So if somebody's interested in what we think the things ought to be, just give us a call and we will gladly send it to you. Awesome. And I think it's something we've got to look at, is coming up with a shortened list of agreed upon reasons for deaths and culls.
Yes, and really need some buy-in from the ASV and
right.
Some, yeah, that's huge. When you talk about numbers, right, what has been the trend on a year-by-year basis on mortality? Do you have that number handy there?
And on sow death loss, as I said, it's come up about 1 to 1.5% a year. It's been doing that about 8 years now. When you go back and look at trend line charts. And, there was a time 15 years ago, we were up around 8 or 9%. It trended down, especially there through about 2013 to about 2015 or 16. And I think a lot of that was when we had PQA certification was coming into effect. We were training our people better and making them more accountable. Then it started to move up. And I've looked at our database, and we've looked at other databases with unrelated farms in them, and the trend lines have been about the same. And we've looked at farms as far as size of farm. We've seen a higher death loss in the larger farms. But on the other side, if we look at the highly productive large farms, we've seen a lesser number. So lots of things that we see have been shifting around. And some of the data we worked on recently, we looked at about 30% of the female death loss is occurring in about a 9-day period from 2 to 3 days before farrowing to 4, 5, or 6 days after farrowing. So why is it in that area? And that's a big stress area. So why do we see so much of it there? What do we got to do to change? What are we doing on pre-care for sow's farrowing, and what are we doing on after she farrows out?
Super interesting. Yeah, that's a tough one. And then start thinking about how the industry changed on being better on timely euthanasia and maybe antibiotic removal, and those things might play a role too.
That's been some of it as the cull sow packers got a little more picky about the animals who were sending. Those animals that had a bad hoof or a big abscess now are euthanized, but that's been in effect 5 or 6 years. It's just not something that happened last year. So why has it kept climbing? It's a big question for the industry to evaluate and start to look at.
Very interesting. Any comments on farrowing rate? No?
Farrowing rate's been kind of interesting. As we've looked over time, it's gone up considerably the last several years. I think our database now, I think in the average, and it was like 85.5%, I think was the average of the database. But we see farms down in the 70s for a year, and there are a few farms that are 94, 95, sometimes 96% for a year. So again, a huge variation there. And again, that's back to, the quality of the guy doing the breeding, the quality of the semen on the day that he breeds, and is that sow in good heat. So again, we will see that much. We normally see that kind of variation. Now, the top end farms are usually the ones in those 30s. They're going to see the farrowing rates in the upper 80s or into the 90s. And a 4% change in farrowing rates, about 1.34 pigs per sow per year improvement. So it's one of those drivers that if it's done right, can get you more pigs. And also lowers your non-productive days, which can save a lot of money.
Right. Is there any highlight when it comes to getting a better farrowing rate? What would be your top few there?
I think the biggest thing there is constantly training of the breeders and reinforcing what they're doing and give them reinforcement. How well are you doing? And the other part is just making sure that the semen we got coming in is quality semen, that we're following the protocols of the semen supplier as far as temperature of the storage unit. And then when we're handling the semen, what are we doing with that excess semen we have when we come back from the breeding barn? How do we treat that semen? So it's a lot of things. And the other thing is try to reduce the number of single matings. We know there's definitely a drop in farrowing rate on 1 mating versus 2. And there's a lot more farms now doing 3+ matings to a subset of sows in there that, again, helps to increase the farrowing rate. So it's letting the sow tell you what you need to do in the breeding area, when and where and how many times.
Any insights on the Wean-to-estrus interval? What did you find there?
Wean-to-estrus, it's interesting. We've watched that over, 16 years now. And it's actually been going down the last several years, with more producers seeing sows cycling an average of under 5 days. And I think a lot of it relates to about 10 years ago or so when we started saying, hey, we're not feeding our sows enough in the farrowing house. It's time we give them a little more diet. So we installed, tubes or something to full feed them. We hooked up and we just opened up the feed system when they farrowed and let them eat all they wanted to eat. And we've seen a nice drop in that wean to first service interval. And if you look at data, and the lower the wean to first service interval, it has a pretty good direct effect on subsequent farrowing rate and subsequent total born. So the faster she cycles back, the more fertile she is, the higher the farrowing rate. And in a lot of cases, we'll have more fertile pigs when she farrows the next time around. So it's again a large driver to improving productivity.
Interesting. Yeah, there's been a handful of interesting studies on that area recently when it comes to full feeding or not, and I think it's one that is changing because many of those studies, to the surprise of many of us, the more feed was not necessarily improving performance in the next one, which historically, it's being something that the industry.
But we got some of these farms, but there's several farms now up in the 16 and a half, 17 total born. We're not probably going to add much to them. But again, if that sow's in good body condition, she's in an increasing plane of nutrition when you breed her, they're going to get more viable eggs shed, and there's going to be a high fertility rate of those eggs. So years ago, I think I'll agree with you, we saw more improvement with it, but there's a chance you can improve those numbers too.
Interesting. How about replacement rate?
Replacement rate, again, everybody, that's one we're sitting, I think, and I'm trying to think in that data set where we were at. I think we're around 58 or 59%. We've seen that kind of work up a little the last few years, partly because of sow death loss. You lose another 2% animals, you got to put at least 2% more back in. So that's been some of it. And a lot of times we see this replacement, it's relative to the price of a cull sow, or have you had a health challenge where you couldn't bring in animals for some period of time, and then you had to pretty much restock the farm. So a lot of variation we see from farm to farm in replacement rate. But we see not a lot of variation between those top 10% farms and the bottom 10% farms. So again, the top 10% are just utilizing those animals better and getting more pigs out of them a lifetime when they're in the farm.
Right. It can easily become a Band-Aid, right?
Oh, yeah, you're right. Right.
Awesome. As we wrap up here, Ron, any final comments on the benchmarking analysis?
Well, I think it's just one of those tools that you can have to say, where are you at compared to the industry, and then what areas do I need to work on? So we've tried to, and some of the work we do is try to sort out those. We got 11 variables in our benchmarking charts that we provide to our producers. And it shows on there which areas I'm weak in, which I'm strong in. And we go back, and those 1 or 2 weak areas is what we got to work on. And recognizing where you're weak at, and then how do I fix that to improve overall performance.
Very good. I always have 3 questions, Ron, that I ask the guests. The first one is, what's your favorite pig-related book or resource?
Oh, pig-related book. I don't know. I've read a lot of different ones. One of my biggest things is reading aloud the research papers, stuff that come out. I'm pretty good about doing that, or pulling something off from a study done somewhere in Europe or something that can we convert that into something we can do here? Yeah.
Very good. How about non-related to pigs or agriculture? Any book or resource that you like?
Oh, not in particular. Again, pretty much my whole life for 47 years has been pigs. So
pigs, right? I guess another way to put this question is, Ron, what is that? A lot of people know you from the industry, but what's the wrong side that people don't know? Something that you like to do, hobby or something like that?
Oh, I don't have a lot of hobbies. One of my couple of favorite things is I like to tinker around and like rebuild decks and do some stuff. Right now I'm working on a project in front of the house on relaying some bricks. And then I like to take some time and go get in a boat somewhere and go out and fish for a while. It's something I enjoy doing too. So it's kind of where you find me. And hopefully here in the next year or so, as I work less, I'll get to do more of those things, like a little more fishing in Florida. It probably is on my radar for sure.
Awesome. And then lastly, in your view, what sets successful swine producers or professionals apart from those that are not?
I think the top end farms, or a lot of them, are almost like a family. If they're not owned by an individual family or they're owned by a group, they're treated as family. And if you become part of that family group, you get recognition for what you do, and you get rewarded for what you do. Those farms are the ones keeping their employees the longer period of time, and those are the ones that are more productive, not having to retrain and replace people. And I've always said, if your W2 percentage is higher than your replacement percentage, you're not going to perform well. So sometimes add up the W2s, divide that, and look at replacement rate. The farms that have a low W2 percent are the more productive farms.
What is do you guys look at turnover in the analysis at all?
We've done a little bit of that, but that's a hard one to do. Actually, we're working on a new benchmarking database for next year. And in that, we sent out a farm information sheet that we like to have filled out. So we're sending those out again now. And on there, we've got the number of employees. We'll know the size of the farm. But it's pretty hard to really get good numbers from that. I'd love to know sometime what it is. And I know other farms I work with, it's too high. There's too many people turning over. But a lot of it, as we talked earlier, is where they're located. The quality of the workforce is not there. They want to come in, put in their day's work, and get paid and stay there. So it's going to be a big industry issue as we move forward. And labor, no matter what industry, and you drive through any town right now, there's help wanted signs all over the place, whether it's a restaurant or a fast food or a hardware store. People are looking for quality people that want to come in, work, and stay there and make that a career. And that's something we got to work on.
Very good. I have a last question for you on the number of sows per employee. Any insights there?
We did a little study a year ago, and it ran anywhere from 250 to 500. And there was really no, I kind of use 350 as kind of a number when I look at staffing the barns and stuff. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of a raw number that I use. And there's been a shift. We used to see about 60% breeders and 40% farrowing. It's actually shifting the other way now, about 40% breeders and about 60% farrowing, because the farrowing house, there's a lot of extra pigs in there that are not getting saved that could improve productivity a tremendous amount.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ron. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
It's been my pleasure too. Thank you.
Imagine if, with a few key concepts, you could have the potential to create a massive positive impact by bringing from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars for swine producers. Join us on this small group and go to the next level of swine nutrition on this 7-week-long elite online training in applied swine nutrition and feeding by myself and my world-class invited speakers. Additionally, you enjoy an exclusive community to exchange ideas. Go now to www.eliteswinenutritionist.com.